On a gray 4-degree morning in Oslo, a preschool teacher opens the door and guides a group of 3-year-olds into a driving rainstorm. They will spend the next 4 hours outside, climbing mud banks, balancing on wet logs, and eating lunch under a canvas tarp. To many parents, this scene looks like exposure to illness or an unnecessary test of endurance. Yet Scandinavian countries consistently rank among the highest in global child well-being indices, with exceptionally low rates of childhood anxiety and mood disorders. The contradiction lies in how modern cultures define parental care. In many developed nations, good parenting is measured by how effectively adults shield a child from physical discomfort, risk, and emotional frustration. In Nordic countries, protection is viewed differently. Shielding a child from the natural environment is understood to deprive the brain of the precise sensory and psychological inputs required to build emotional resilience. The belief that cold air or rain directly causes illness remains one of the most persistent misconceptions in modern parenting. Respiratory infections are caused by viral pathogens, which actually thrive in poorly ventilated indoor spaces where people gather in close proximity. When children are kept indoors during winter months to keep them safe, their exposure to concentrated airborne pathogens increases. Beyond microbiology, outdoor play in challenging weather triggers a profound physiological shift. When a child moves through cold, wet, or uneven terrain, their autonomic nervous system continuously adjusts to fluctuating physical stressors. This process, known as allostasis, trains the nervous system to handle physiological pressure without activating a full panic response. A child who learns to regulate their core temperature, balance on mud, and tolerate cold fingers is simultaneously building a higher threshold for psychological stress. Physical discomfort becomes a manageable sensation rather than an emotional crisis. When parents eliminate environmental friction, they often inadvertently increase childhood anxiety. At Queen Maud University College in Norway, Professor Ellen Sanseter has studied the impact of risky play on child development for decades. Her research identifies 6 essential categories of play that children naturally seek out: high speeds, great heights, dangerous tools, dangerous elements like fire or deep water, rough and tumble play, and disappearing or getting lost. Sanseter's work demonstrates that engaging in these behaviors acts as an anti-phobic mechanism. When a young child climbs a tree high enough to feel a sudden surge of fear, but stays long enough to master the height and climb back down safely, their brain rewires its fear response. The brain pairs the physiological arousal of risk with a sense of mastery rather than helplessness. Conversely, when parents step in to prevent every climb, sweep away every obstacle, or constantly warn of potential danger, the child receives an unintended message. You are incompetent, and the world is fundamentally unsafe. Consider what happens during a routine visit to a neighborhood park. A 5-year-old begins to climb a wooden structure. From the bench, a well-meaning parent reflexively calls out, "Be careful, you're going too high, don't slip." While intended to protect, this verbal intervention creates 3 distinct cognitive disruptions. First, it abruptly pulls the child's attention away from their physical surroundings and forces them to process adult anxiety. Second, it replaces the child's internal risk assessment with an external warning, preventing them from developing self-reliance. Third, it increases muscle tension and heart rate, making a slip more likely. Scandinavian educators use a completely different communication framework. Instead of broad, alarmist commands, they ask specific, observational questions that redirect the child's focus back to their own body and environment. When a child is in a challenging physical situation, the goal is to activate their prefrontal cortex rather than their survival panic. If a child is high in a tree, instead of shouting, "Be careful," a parent can ask, "Do you feel stable where your feet are right now?" Or, What is your plan for your next handhold? If a child is carrying a heavy stick or balancing on a wet rock, the prompt becomes, notice how slippery that bark feels under your shoes. These prompts force the child to evaluate their actual physical reality, assess their current capability, and make an autonomous decision. If the child realizes they feel unsafe, they learn to back down on their own accord. If they realize they are secure, they experience genuine competence. This subtle shift transforms a moment of parental control into an exercise in executive function. Understanding the mechanics of child development allows parents to trade anxiety for clarity. If you value actionable parenting insights, grounded in developmental psychology and research rather than short-lived trends, consider subscribing to the channel. The Scandinavian philosophy of Friluftsliv, or open-air living, is not an elite athletic pursuit. It is a daily commitment to uncurated movement in nature, regardless of the weather forecast. The phrase, "there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing," is often cited, but its psychological implication is deeper than simple gear selection. When parents insist on going outside in the rain, they model environmental adaptability. They demonstrate that plans do not collapse because the sky changes, and that physical comfort is something you create through preparation rather than passive avoidance. For a child, wearing appropriate wool layers and a waterproof shell while playing in a downpour teaches a fundamental developmental lesson. Discomfort is temporary, manageable, and negotiable. Implementing this approach does not require moving to Scandinavia, but it does require changing daily household routines. Start by removing weather as a variable in whether play happens. Instead of asking, "Is it too rainy to go out?" the question becomes, "What clothes do we need to stay warm out there today?" Allow children agency within safety parameters. A 4-year-old who insists on wearing rain boots without socks will quickly experience cold feet. Rather than arguing for 20 minutes at the front door, allow the natural consequence to occur while bringing extra socks in your bag. When the child complains 5 minutes into the walk, avoid saying, "I told you so." Instead, validate the physical reality calmly. Your feet feel cold because your socks are missing. Here are your socks. Let's put them on so your feet feel warm again. This teaches cause and effect without inviting power struggles. Overparenting extends far beyond physical safety. It deeply affects how children spend their time. Modern scheduling often fills every hour of a child's day with structured athletics, academic enrichment, or adult-directed hobbies. While well-intentioned, overscheduling strips children of unstructured play, the primary context in which human beings learn social negotiation, emotional regulation, and self-directed motivation. When adults organize every activity, referee every conflict, and dictate every rule, children do not learn how to resolve disputes or manage boredom. In Scandinavia, school breaks are intentionally long, and free play is prioritized well into middle childhood. Children are left to negotiate the rules of a game themselves. When an argument breaks out over who gets to use a sled, Scandinavian adults step back unless physical harm is imminent. They allow the children to experience the uncomfortable friction of disagreement, negotiate terms, and find a resolution. This brings us to the second half of the Scandinavian parenting model, Hygge. Often translated casually as coziness, in child psychology terms, Hygge represents high-quality co-regulation and emotional security. It is the necessary counterweight to the high physical and social challenge of outdoor, autonomous play. A child cannot build resilience through challenge alone. Challenge without safety leads to chronic stress. Hygge creates a predictable, low-demand environment where the child's nervous system can downregulate. It is characterized by warmth, shared presence, low light, warm food, and crucially, the complete absence of parental evaluation or performance pressure. When a child comes inside after hours of challenging outdoor play, their body enters a parasympathetic recovery state. Sitting together by a warm fire or under a blanket, eating a simple meal without screens or adult lecturing triggers the release of oxytocin and lowers stress hormones. This environment tells the child's brain, you are safe, you are accepted, and nothing is demanded of you right now. In many modern homes, indoor time is dominated by homework battles, screen management, or continuous adult correction. By contrast, Nordic Hygge intentionally preserves periods of time where parents lay down their managerial role. They are not teaching, correcting, or assessing. They are simply present. This predictable cycle, stepping out into high challenge and returning to complete emotional safety, builds what psychologists call an internal secure base. The long-term consequences of these two different approaches become starkly visible during adolescence and early adulthood. Children raised in environments of hyperprotection and constant adult supervision often develop an external locus of control. They come to believe that their well-being is entirely dependent on outside circumstances and adult intervention. When faced with university deadlines, workplace conflicts, or harsh weather, their coping mechanisms quickly falter because they have never practiced self-soothing or autonomous problem-solving under pressure. In contrast, children raised with high autonomy and regular exposure to physical and environmental friction develop a robust internal locus of control. They know how to assess real danger, how to recover from physical discomfort, how to negotiate interpersonal conflicts, and how to seek comfort when exhausted. Building a resilient child does not require exposing them to harshness or withholding love. It requires distinguishing between real danger and manageable discomfort. When you step back on the playground, let your child feel the cold rain on their cheeks, or replace an alarmist warning with a thoughtful observational question. You are not stepping away from your role as a parent. You are stepping into a deeper, evidence-based form of leadership. You are showing them that the world is a place to be navigated rather than feared, and that they possess the inner resources to meet whatever environment they encounter.